Good day to you. This is Galactic bringing you another science presentation in our Unimetrics series meant to explore and expose to view a new geometry in extrapolating the importance, the possible meaning, one could say, at this hypothetical stage of a spherical geometry. We would like to have applications in physics. That, of course, is the goal. So what is the importance of spherical geometry? It would be in relation to linear geometry, which is currently the only basis of science. Now, in extrapolating the meaning of spherical geometry, we simply apply it to what was discovered in the 20th century at all levels, which was the sphere. We know that the atom is a sphere, of course. This is the basic unit, and we've been covering that using the Boschkovich force curve dynamical system, which is a basic axiomatic physical mechanical theory of the universe based on two forces. This has been substantiated, certainly to a threshold where it is an appreciable theory. I believe that it's final, but my opinion does not matter in science. Only insofar as a matter can be proved is it useful for scientific communication. Now, in the hypothetical region, there are always competing theories in a healthy system. In order to derive knowledge from the universe, it is necessary to make a division of some kind. We consider it to be a binary division. Either something is true or it is false. However, that turns out to be just a little bit naive due to the fact that we're involved in an involution. We are extracted from the universe, so we're actually part of it. And so is consciousness, an impalpable concept, but nevertheless a structure that exists in the universe. So far, we only know of one location in the universe for consciousness, and the notion of consciousness extends beyond that of humans who have a peculiar form of consciousness, at least from our perspective, which appears to be objective enough, although again the involution problem has suggested to a number of top hypothetical, that is, research scientists trying to push the envelope, that consciousness could have some kind of spooky aspect. I don't see any way around that. But it is healthy to have competing theories. In the theory, for instance, of the Big Bang, it was resisted at first. And in the theory of the supermassive black hole, which is now the most important topic by far in astrophysics, everything has been left behind. Nobody cares about stars, galaxies, clusters of galaxies, or anything else in the universe which would be of interest to a rational man seeking consistent, coherent, rational solutions to human and scientific questions. That's all been abandoned in the madness, the insanity. It's a psychosis, a legitimate psychosis that has caught up all of our top physicists who are all government employees. One way or the other, their rice bowl is filled by going along with the current propaganda. What we'll be talking about today is the supermassive black hole, an extraordinarily frightening subject. I mean that in all seriousness, it's horrifying. There is an experience which I believe is shared. It's not just my own subjective point of view. That when approaching some involved modern upper echelon model, a system of theories which are bound together in some quasi hypothetical sense in order to explain something which is not fully understood. One finds a human tendency towards fad, but if there's a feedback system that is biased, that will affect how science is presented. That, of course, is what's happened. So in our investigation of the supermassive black hole, we wish to resort to the conclusions that we were able to achieve in the prior few presentations, featuring the Boshkovich force curve, where we found, there's the lab cat, she's allowed in now again because I need love. The supermassive black hole is, of course, a substantial new discovery at the cutting edge of physics. Nothing more exciting has been discovered yet. It even supersedes the Big Bang, which is now fading into history as scientists focus all of their attention on the supermassive black hole. It is a baffling phenomenon, and that is why the psychosis is at a maximum intensity right now. For the past few decades, ever since the supermassive black hole was made quite famous by Stephen Hawking and to a certain extent by Sir Roger Penrose in their various approaches to this extraordinary phenomenon, there has been a plethora, a word which I've come to love. My father used this word because he thought it was a funny word. Plethora. It means a heap. A heapin' helpin', as Granny of the Beverly Hillbillies would say, have a heapin' helpin' of propagandization. In particular, you can definitely gauge the unreal level of psychosis in supermassive black hole theory by the plethora of diagrams which are called artist's renderings, or artist's view, or an artist's impression. And then there is the artist's impression of the supermassive black hole with its accretion disk. We'll be talking about that. And the jets. They very often have jets. And they may always have jets. It's just that at certain scale or at certain phases of the history of a supermassive black hole, those jets might not be visible to us, but they may still be there. It's just interesting to point that out, but a whole class of supermassive black holes have bipolar jets. This is associated with another phenomenon called the quasar, which also typically has jets. Most of the time, if not always. It's kind of a footnote that you have to add because all of this is brand new. That should be borne in mind as you face the absolute tidal waves of propaganda. These artists' renderings are absolutely misleading, and they shouldn't be allowed. Artists' renderings of a supermassive black hole phenomenon are literally absurd, literally ridiculous, but they're also harmful. They're anti-scientific. Okay, we're not going to deal with that. It's just, I'm warning you, it's best not to look at those diagrams at all. They're based on a specific model which has not at all been proved, and we are going to approach that model with a deadly hammer because now we have direct evidence of what actually occurs at what has come to be called a singularity, which is the term of the most interest to a mathematician. It is the mathematical formulation of the supermassive black hole that produces the idea of a singularity. The notion of a singularity and a supermassive black hole is very important to bear in mind. because of the definition of the singularity, which defines the whole. The whole in black hole refers to the center, the geometric center. Now, just to give an overview of how I approach this topic, I happen to know, because I have proved, that there is no such thing as our linear system center number, which we call 0. That is a highly, extraordinarily peculiar number. In some sense, it cannot be called a number, but according to the development of science itself, we are forced to call 0 a number as if it were any other linear number. It is peculiar because it is the Archimedean balance point of linear systematic space. That is an extraordinarily drawn out, but necessarily drawn out term for the center of our grid system. It is a grid. 1D is a straight line, 2D forms a squared plane, and 3D forms a cubed volume grid. That is the only system of mathematics that's ever been known to science or used by it. So it's extremely important to understand the Archimedean of the system. That's the center, the geometric center. The reason it's called the Archimedean is due to an early form of calculus invented by Archimedes. This is on record. A lot of the old records of the Greeks were lost. The fire at Alexandria was devastating to science in terms of our ability to recover the writings of the ancients. And there have been other catastrophes by which a lot of the early writings were lost. But we do have somewhat, I guess you could say extraordinarily or miraculously, some of the writings of Archimedes where he describes how he used the calculus. So the calculus is an ancient idea. But it's really a very primitive form of calculus, of course, and perhaps should not even be called that. I do in order to bring out a point, an emphatic point of comparison, that Archimedes was able to deduce the area under a parabola, which is, of course, a curve, by using a balancing system. And it's just a remarkable. It's worth looking into. We will not do so now because we would like to get to the topic, the hottest topic of all time. Of course, this is the beauty pageant contest, and sometimes this is apples and oranges, or you could say brunettes and blondes in the beauty pageant contest. That there's several candidates for the most exciting topic of all time in science. But the supermassive black hole will definitely be on the list. It's monstrously overpowering to the human intellect to contemplate this bizarre, paradoxical object. So it's extremely important in such a case to be sure that we as scientists, amateur scientists, which is the only true form of scientist, a professional scientist has divided interests. He's beholden to whoever feeds him. So that's why these models tend to exhibit a life of their own as if they had always been the dominant theory. That is not true in the case certainly of the Big Bang or supermassive black hole. In fact, all of astrophysics is based entirely on one model that is extremely unhealthy. And it's been catastrophic, particularly to the public audience, which is always looking to science for clues on how we can orient our lives according to what the universe says is reality. That is the definition of science, the best definition of science. It's for humans to gain orientation by direct instruction from the universe. No professors, no theories, no mathematics. However, the whole legacy of science is all of those. What it is also is a history of human failure, human foible, really human sin. Don't be afraid of these religious terms. Learn to adopt these terms which have come to be hated and mistrusted, because such terms as sin, or sin, God, Satan, righteousness, any terms like that just turn off the modern mind because of brainwashing and propaganda. A rational man is not afraid of any goddamn term that a human can come up with. And to be afraid of the concept of God, or in this case, afraid of the concept of sin, just shows that you're an immature little brat. You've been manipulated by your masters to avoid certain topics that they don't like. So your goddamned, pardon the expression, your goddamned physicists are a pack of notorious liars. They have to be to survive. So if you want to formulate some compassion for them on that basis, I do. But I make a rigorous distinction between the human being, such as Sean Carroll, or Brian Greene, or Michio Kaku, or Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder, or Einstein, or Dirac, or Feynman, anybody. They're humans, okay? They're humans just like you and me. I think it's so easy to overlook that because we're dichotomized. We're basically antagonized by propaganda to choose one side or another, when a rational man does not do that. A rational man keeps things open until there's proof. And that's where the propaganda begins in astrophysics. A monstrous, absolutely monstrous projection of pseudoscience and anti-science that defines astrophysics today. You'd have to call it the tertiary, the final stage of madness, which began with the discovery of the universe exactly 1 century ago. It was the discovery of more sphericity, more spherical objects. All right, so the history of the discovery of the black hole is notorious and should be well digested, although it's as when Ezekiel and John each were told to eat a certain document. This is in prophetic scripture in the Southwest Semitic holy writings, which were colligated by the Jews, thank God, so we could at least get the wisdom books, which are for all men. But Ezekiel was given a book to eat, in a vision, of course. But in both cases, the prophet is warned, when you eat this book, it's going to be sweet in your mouth. In other words, yum, yum, yum. But then you're going to get indigestion. It's going to make your belly sour. And that's a perfect definition of astrophysics today. That all of these marvelous, overwhelming, overpowering new discoveries to thresholds unimaginable just decades before the Mount Wilson discoveries and discoveries since. We've encountered, obviously, a brand new universe in terms of size and population of amazing objects, just utterly astonishing, which you never hear about, because what you're going to hear about instead is the whole. A whole. When was this discovered? It was actually a process, and it was resisted in the same way that a lot of initial discoveries are resisted in their initial interpretation, because it's either provable or surmisable that it's too soon to have a theory, because every theory must be proved. Well, not anymore. Not in astrophysics. The rules have changed. You don't have to prove anything anymore. All you have to do is have a mathematical extrapolation that suggests whatever the fuck you want. And mathematics has definitely been manipulated. In a way, it's innocent because nobody yet has realized the whole at the center of the mathematical system, which in fact is zero. Although that's not the only flaw of the linear system. The main flaw is irrationality and infinity, each of which has to be solved in its own way. But a peculiar problem of the linear system is it has a center that's null, and that's what leads to the whole. The whole is a hole in our mathematics that is known. What is not commonly known to the public is all of that is glossed over. That it's all it is a mathematical, it's actually a mathematical infinity, which is placed at the center of the supermassive black hole. This is because when gravity is expressed in the universe, it's expressed in terms of the number of protons. Protons cause gravity. Nothing else does. Only protons cause gravity. So the gravitational potential, that is the actual force is what that is called a potential because nothing's moving. But it's still a force, as you and I discovered. So this force pulls space in. Einstein proved that. So that is a perfectly legitimate geometric visualization of gravity. It's contracting space. Now, what's paradoxical about that is that it's contracting space toward a center. That's tautological. So you have to ask the question, what is causing the bending of space? Well, you could say it's the proton, but then this is why we have hadron colliders. What's inside the proton that's causing the bending of space? Well, when you analyze it geometrically, using the linear approach, the center is always zero. We have no other way of parameterizing the space of the black hole. So it is a spherical phenomenon because it's gravity. Gravity is a spherical phenomenon, of course. So there is a center of gravity. Now, the center of gravity in a gravitational body is not a single proton. It's the integral of protonic force, which creates a force field, which is the definition of a sphere. So it's a sphere. However, you can see that it's not just a sphere as a surface, which is what we would think of as the surface of a globe or the surface of a sphere, technically. But in the case of the supermassive black hole, well, any gravitational field, the sphere is a volume sphere. So the surface of the sphere is a volume. So you can take slices of it, just as on a line, you can take slices of it, and those are called linear distances, line segments. On a plane, you can cut the plane in various ways. In volume space, you can cut that in one of two ways. You can either cut it using a cubic grid, and space-time is merely a hypercubic grid, or you can construct it spherically, which is what the universe does. And right there, you should see the problem. Our grid does not match reality. And where the glitch, the inevitable glitch, since there's no direct correlation between cubic or hypercubic space, which is linear, and spherical space, there is no real, well, there's an irrational, although constant, relationship based on the number tau, which is 2 pi, as you know. So there is a mathematical glitch, and it was inevitable that we would come up against it. The glitch was circumvented such that the crisis was delayed by the discovery of the calculus, Newtonian and Leibnizian calculus, both of which are required in their different definitions of the calculus, which taken together form the correct definition of the calculus, which is now, of course, the only way to probe space is with calculus, because we've grown addicted to it. But the calculus is merely meant to approximate curvature in order to manufacture anything on Earth using the elements of the Earth. We use calculus in industry to engineer products which we can manufacture to specification using the calculus when we need to get curvature. We're so good at this now that we can actually guide spacecraft all the way to the outer planets using nothing but machine logic algebra, which is linear. So it does work, but that still covers the glitch. And where we have encountered the glitch is in two places, which are predictable now, at least certainly in retrospect. As you probe towards the center of spheric space, you're going to find out that your number system breaks at the quantum limit. But going out, it also breaks. Now, the supermassive black hole is a physical thing. That is what we say, the term we use for is object. And that the object does not even have to be visible. Now, in the case of the hole, the supermassive black hole, that of course is considered to be a physical object. How can we say that without being able to see it? You should know the answer. You should be able to guess at the answer. It's because of the effect it has on the surrounding environment, which in the case of a SMBH, I'll just abbreviate it from now on, so as to avoid saying that hideous term. SMBH is good enough. Is it a physical object? There's a catch there. You have to be cautious how you answer that. It depends on what you mean by physical. In the accepted sense, yes, of course. We're going to stop there. I'm not going to go into, angels on a pinhead sort of things, although one does have to be cautious here. It's not physical in a certain restricted sense, perhaps. And what would be the difference? We know of the presence of the phenomenon which we call an object, and I accept this thus far. We know of it as a phenomenon because it exerts a gravitational influence which can be proved. And you may already know of the evidence that proves the existence of what should be called a gravitational locus. It's a gravitational locus. That's the only characteristic of the SMBH that is known for certain. Everything else is extrapolation and theory. Now, this is not to say that we shouldn't be hypothesizing. Of course, this is exactly what science does. What you don't want to do is jump to conclusions. Well, I might as well be singing through my ass, given that kind of advice today. The age of reservation is long gone. Now it's every man for himself. It's just organized madness. So that if you try to find out about the SMBH, to know what the astrophysicists actually know about it, good fucking luck. I spent decades digging into this without much success because of the gobbledygook and the mania. It's just incredible the level of psychosis surrounding this object. You could say in a way it's understandable because of the nature of humans. I'm sorry, that's right out in strict science. You have to remain logical or you will go wrong. These things cannot be taken into a laboratory and studied. So when these astrophysicists claim that they have photographed an SMBH, you have to look into that to be sure that they are telling the truth. They will lie. They do lie. Most of the time they're lying. In the strict sense of science, what they should be saying should be much more guarded. Everything that's being said and hypothesized would be perfectly acceptable to a strict scientist such as myself if only it were stated as theory. But it's just as what happened with natural selection. After a certain threshold, I'll just say certain powers that become interested in the topic sociologically tend, whether you think that that's under the guidance of an actual consciousness, a sentient consciousness, or it's just an automatic process of sin, either way, you're guaranteed to have corruption even in a scientific system if there is not a rational feedback system to control one-sidedness, bias. The paramount example of that was the Big Bang. Unbelievable. Well, really, natural selection as well. These are mega-scale scams. Is nothing less than that. Natural selection has been disproved. The Big Bang is psychotic. It can be disproved directly. And this matter of the supermassive black hole is wildly blown out of proportion in certain specific directions. First of all, when you find out about the goddamned thing, the first thing that is said, from NASA right down to Tammy the fat-assed, bacon-eating, gluttonous whore, who is just one of the many commentators who jumped on the bandwagon, and her column on the supermassive black hole never failed to include bacon gluttony, that the supermassive black holes are just devouring everything in sight. She would say for breakfast. And I saw a picture of Tammy. She's a fat hog. So she was just projecting onto the black hole her gluttony. Well, that's really all astrophysics is doing. They're projecting onto the black hole the hole in their head that they inherited from linear algebra, the zero at the center of the grid. They put that zero right there because they have no choice, and then talked about gravitational collapse. Now, gravitational collapse is well known. A star, when it reaches a certain stage in its development, can, and there are examples of this, they'll suddenly collapse. There are provable reasons for why that happens. This is a known fact that stars will collapse. It's a gravitational collapse. There is no other way to collapse except by the force of gravity. But what happens is the material in the resultant, for instance, neutron star is very dense. And it's so dense that it fits the propagandistic scheme to just drive insane the public listening audience. That a teaspoon of neutron star dust weighs as much as a battleship. Well, people who don't think very clearly find that to be remarkable. because it's good cocktail party talk. It makes it sound like they keep up with science, at least in the sense of garnering the wonders, so they can be starry-eyed as the madcap mathematicians are. And so this is how the propaganda goes out. So an SMBH eats light and eats galaxies. It eats everything around it. They're eating the universe. Well, that's ridiculous. They don't even know what it is. Now, let's get back to the facts. How was this discovered? It was discovered by the behavior of the stars around the nucleus of a galaxy. And the nucleus of a galaxy, of course, is the center of gravity. So you would expect, if there's going to be a supermassive object, you would expect to find one at the center of a galaxy, if there is such a thing. Well, there is such a thing. There is definitely a gravitational locus that can be called supermassive. Is it a mass of protons? Very likely is, but it's not been proved that it is. It could be a hole in space, where space has been turned inside out. It's a little dramatic and it may be a little irrational, but nobody knows that that's a protonic core. It's assumed that it's got to be a protonic core because nothing else except the protonic core is known to produce gravity. So it's a reasonable assumption. Let's take it from there. So what was extrapolated from that? Because of the discovery of collapsing, gravitationally collapsed objects, it was discerned that mathematically, this is the turning point, so prick up your ears. When you hear the word mathematically, you have to be on your guard, because this is the wrong way to do science. You use mathematics to prove something that you've deduced, but if you then turn around and use mathematics to create your deductions, rather than using mathematics to prove an already formulated deduction based on structure, if you're not using mathematics strictly to support your argument, then you are using mathematics incorrectly. That's all they do. The Big Bang is purely a mathematical construction. It has nothing to do with physical reality except redshift, and I've covered that. In this case, there is a mathematical extrapolation on the phenomenon of gravitational collapse, because depending on how much protonic mass is at the core, this would be the supermassive black hole, is a mass of protons. If it indeed is protonic material, it is now suggested at the somewhat, I guess you could say, lunatic fringe of an already psychotic industry that perhaps it's dark matter, in other words, non-baryonic material. Well, that just is extrapolating on another wild fantasy, which we'll also cover when we get to galaxy morphology. I'll disambiguate for you the whole charade, the whole hoax of dark matter. Dark energy is not even worth mentioning. That is so obviously a mathematical hoax that nobody in their right mind would take dark energy seriously. Just the name is stupid. Well, so's the black hole. Why is it called that? Do you know? Well, the black, I think you understand. Tammy, the gluttonous whore, knows exactly why it's black. It's black because it's stuffing its gills with anything that gets near it. It's a gluttonous hog. which devours light. That's why it's black, because it eats light. Does that sound like science fiction to you? Well, that's why the movie Interstellar was made. One of the most amazing movies. I couldn't believe that anybody in their right mind took that seriously. Au contraire. The movie Interstellar is cited by top-notch physicists as being the public's best introduction to what they know. The movie Interstellar has no science in it at all. None. So what is this black? We got that. What is the whole? That is a mathematical singularity. And here's how it works. If you have a gravitational mass, which would be protons, that is what mass is. That's what causes gravity. But because they're gravitational objects, when they get together, they pull themselves in. So it gets more and more compact. And you can conceivably pile more and more protons that get attracted and then snap into the ball, which is supposedly the protonic mass. You may already start intuiting there's a great big hole in that goddamn theory already. Protons just collecting forever? Well, if you go that way, what you get, first of all, we do know that there's such a thing as a neutron star. Its gravitational field can be computed from companions, whose orbit then can be computed. This is difficult to do because you have to be able to get the mass of each object, and then the mathematics is simple. But this has been done, revealing that the neutron star is extraordinarily dense, which means that in a volume space, the protons are extraordinarily compacted together. Well, that creates, of course, an increase in the gravitational force, the gravitational field pulling in. Well, is there a limit to that? If you pile on the protons, how big could that get? And how dense would it compact itself before collapsing totally? Would that be possible? Well, no. It couldn't collapse totally. It would disappear into itself. So that does not happen. But what has been extrapolated instead, believe it or not, using space-time geometry, considered to be God's gift to humans, that's a superpositional assessment. You could say it that way if you're willing to just leave out the other half of truth as if it didn't exist and just sweep it away, and you just choose that side and just say fuck it to any other evidence or interpretation. You could do that. So really what's happened is the extrapolation of collapse has been taken to its algebraic conclusion, which is that it could continue to collapse until at the center gives way. In Wikipedia, this is called the total collapse of physics. That's what Wikipedia says. The total collapse of physics? Well, instead of questioning that, well, you must be misformulating it. Instead, they go, oh, no, there is no way we're misformulating this. And therefore, the total collapse of physics is predicated. The total collapse of physics. No more meaning to the terms space and time. Either one, they're meaningless at the center. The right way to interpret that is, your mathematics system has betrayed you and now you've lost your mind. That's the correct way to approach that assertion. Instead of the rational approach, that can't be right, what is asserted instead is the center inverts That is called the singularity, and that is the only correct definition of a singularity. It's the null center of the linear spatial system stuck onto the center of the black hole such that null is there, and then according to inversive mathematics, it turns inside out and goes into another universe. What I'd like to point out, which is going to sound strange, that is remarkably close to the truth. With the single exception is that space and time cannot turn inside out. There is no other universe. That is an insane assertion, that there even could be another universe, and yet I'll show you where that other universe is. You've already seen it in the Boschkovich force curve. But it's not another universe. It's another aspect to the universe that has a definite geometric relation to the universe that we can see and measure. But there's another universe tied to the one we can see, inextricable from the universe that we can see, and it's perpendicular to our spatial perceptual system. I have identified what that domain is for the first time, although it has been said indirectly for over a century. We know the space domain, as the proverb goes, like the back of our hand. The problem is we use a 3D grid, but insofar as we're capable of overlaying the spherical spatial system, we can make do with sine, cosine, complex numbers, and calculus. We can make that grid, we can force it to conform to the actual shape of the universe, which of course is spherical. But then we run into a problem at the two limits. This is the problem at the inner limit, so it's related to the quantum paradox. And in fact, it is also stated in Wikipedia that the only solution to the problem of the mathematical geometry of the supermassive black hole as it is currently understood at top echelon physics, it is the intersection of the quantum mechanical paradox and the whole in general relativity. So it's the intersection of quantum mechanics and space-time, revealing the weakness of each. And the supermassive black hole is stated in Wikipedia, according to the literature from which it gleans its knowledge to give to us in encyclopedic form, that the only known solution, this is fully admitted, the only known solution for the twin paradox of the singularity at the center of the SMBH is quantum gravity. You and I have already discovered quantum gravity. We saw it in the Boschkovich force curve. Just as a refresher, the curve looks like this. It dips, and then it skyrockets. This part of the curve is an asymptotic curve coming out of linear infinity. The dip is the approach to the intersection of centripetal and centrifugal force where they're balanced, and then where it skyrockets, it's going into the energy domain, which is invisible, immeasurable, because we can only measure space. We cannot measure energy geometrically. We can't see it. It doesn't have spatial presence. And there are a lot of footnotes, aren't there? This is the most amazing paradox, and therefore the most amazing puzzle to solve. What I'll be showing you, now that I've given the bracketing information in the first of this dual presentation, You now know what, in general, is considered to be the SMBH. In the next presentation, I'll show you what it actually is that changes astrophysics. Because I have the right answer, and I'll prove that to you. The results of this discovery are so astronomical, pardon the pun, that it affects astrophysics from top to bottom, completely changes our view of the Big Bang, completely changes our view of what is a galaxy, helps us to finally understand what is a quasar, and finally solves the buried controversy that was begun by Halton Christian Arp in the 1960s. And I won't go into the details of the horrendous treatment that that great man of science received, because he understood the problems with quasar modeling. You will be one of the first people to ever understand the quasar, the SMBH, and the spiral and elliptical galaxy families. Much more is available too. I've made a series of dozens of discoveries, all enabled by spherical geometry, because spherical geometry is the rationalization of the singularity and infinity. It's the rationalization of the quantum paradox and the mystery of the cosmological origin. Everything is directly answered once you know the right geometry. So I hope you stay tuned, and I hope you enjoyed this introduction to the supermassive black hole. In closing, I want you to know that I have renamed that object, and my name is going to stick, and SMBH is going to be forgotten. And if for any reason that I'm wrong in what I say, then I should be erased from this universe. Because as long as I have consciousness in any form, I will reappear in the future to make sure that that goddamn name is changed. These psychotics are not allowed to win. They will not get away with their governmental brainwashing program as long as I have a voice. It's called a panther. So stay tuned and keep looking up at night. It's the best time you'll spend on Earth is looking at the stars or just the planets, or best yet, get up very high and watch the galaxy revolve overhead for as many minutes or hours as you can take it. It's better than meditation, it's better than fasting, it's better than prayer. It's better than anything that you can do to be here now, is to look up into the night sky and watch it for a while. Just do it. Trust your professor on this. It'll change your life. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me forever. So we'll be right back. This is Intergalactic, bringing you the secrets of the universe. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm certainly having a great deal of fun. We'll be right back.